Hey everybody, this is DM Mike, and this is the next campaign diary for DOIP. Now, we finished up Axeholm. Of course, here are the stats. I'll put them up. We had one full session that started with Axeholm and ended with Axeholm. That was the entire session. We played for about 3 hours and 40 minutes or something like that. I think we started kind of like 20 minutes late, which is okay every once in a while. No big deal. But we spent the entire time there, and this is how it went down. First off, the dungeon itself. 10% of the dungeon was actually explored during this adventure. Like, everything took place in one area of Axeholm, and it was up in the balcony, and we'll get to that in a little bit, how that kind of unfolded. But if you remember, we left off, the characters were right at the entrance. Everybody was pouring into the front door, or tumbling into the front door, and we're taking on the first batch of ghouls that had heard all the noise and started their attack. Now, they crawled all over the statues there. You can see on the map, I got two little statues that kind of create this bottlenecked area. But they stood behind there and kind of used that as a defense and pushed back all the ghouls and pretty much killed them all. You can see here also the map is kind of unique. It is... I've changed it. Now, I haven't changed the layout. I haven't changed its size, but what I did add to it was, well, I created a dungeon draft. First of all, it's a completely different map aesthetically. There's more in the map, and also I added ice. I added ice and snow because of the powers of the Banshee. Just her cold, her corruption had kind of spread across Axeholm, and you kind of see it here in some of these shots here of just how I set up the entire map with huge chandeliers, a little bit of soft focus and not parallaxing, but what's the word I'm looking for? Depth of field in the map, so it kind of felt like you were in a higher location. If you went to the second level, you could look down over the balcony. It was slightly blurred. It was a lot of fun to put together, but there's a lot of blue here, and unfortunately I put blue carpeting in there, which was a mistake on my part. And basically I had made those maps prior and wasn't going to do any ice. It was later that I discovered, well, I want to change this up. I want to make some difficult terrain, so characters have to make a decision on where they want to start and end their moves to make it a little more interesting. So I wasn't about to redo all the maps and go back and change things. So it was kind of a late addition, and that's why I kind of got stuck with blue carpeting, but also blue ice. And it wasn't that difficult to distinguish at the table, but yeah, it was a poor color choice. But anyway, they fought off those ghouls, and I think it's paralyzing poison or something they have. Really, through the whole session, didn't do anything. It's the constitutional saving throw is so low that most players are not going to even be affected by it. You may get lucky. Sure, you may get lucky and something might happen. But for me, throughout the whole session, that stuff never worked. But they kind of made mincemeat out of the ghouls. And just so you guys know, I didn't change anything. I did not add to their hit points. I didn't take away from the hit points. I left everything as is in Axeholm because it's a pretty intense place to begin with. And it's also a great centerpiece for your campaign. It can be filled with atmosphere, and I mean, you could go all out with this particular location. I'd highly encourage it. If you got audio or anything you can use it, because it is a highlight of the campaign. But I didn't adjust anything, numbers or hit points or AC or anything. The only thing I did adjust was the Banshee. I kept her within her hit point ratio, but I just gave her an additional like 15 or 20 hit points, which really, in the grand scheme of things, was allowed her to take one more hit, basically, in a given round of any kind. But that's all I did. So there wasn't a lot of adjustment here. But they finished off those ghouls, and look, they didn't explore anything. It's kind of funny. They went right into the foyer, looked around the room, kind of, used their fog, cleared the fog of war in that location, looked up, saw the balcony, and if you remember right, on the map, there's like these arrow slits you can kind of see, or murder holes, within that main foyer. I don't know what they call it. I'll just call it a foyer. And I said you could see some blue lights. They're very faint up in there, and they kind of surmised that, okay, well, that's got to be where the Banshee is, right? So they just went right for it. How'd they do that? Well, they had grappling hooks and rope, of course. Two of the people, I'm not sure who cast it, 'cause I don't remember now, but two people had mage hand, and they just maged hand, can you say, is that plural? Maged hand, each grappling hook, and set it up there on the balcony so they could climb up. And then I think it was Gib who used, a cantrip or a spell that projected his voice. And so they made a lot of noise up there, and they could hear more ghouls coming. So they said, okay, great, we're going to go tackle those and go right to the Banshee. So they climbed up the balcony, and as soon as they got up there, boom, here come all the ghouls from level 2 after hearing this much noise on the second floor. And in that room, in that balcony, is where everything took place. They did not explore the map whatsoever. It was just a beeline for wherever the threat was. So they fought all the ghouls and kind of bottlenecked them right there at that door. There was only like, I think 7 or 8 or something like that. I think maybe 7 or so. I can't remember now. But they were doing a really good job of kind of funneling them in. The druid, I think, changed into a bear, and Grok kind of stepped away from the door, so all the ghouls actually could flood in. It wasn't just one person, at the door keeping, anybody else from really interacting with the combat. So they allowed a lot of those ghouls to come in. And about 3 or 4 rounds into this, maybe say like round 3, is when I introduced the Banshee. Now, I didn't have her coming through the ceiling or through the door or through the walls. I had her come up through the middle of the floor when she made her arrival. Just so all you could see, if this was the floor, all you could see was her hand coming up and then her just kind of coming through the floor. And I shot her up 30 feet into the air. And the first power I used was Wail. I felt like that was the most effective thing to do, because if you use Frighten, then you've got people, if it actually works, you've got people running all over the place, and when you try to use Wail, well, too many people are spread out all over the place, right? So it felt like, to me, the most appropriate thing to do was make your presence known and then blast Wail and see what happens. Well, nothing happened. Not much happened at all. Matter of fact, Wail and Frightened only worked on one person. When I shot off Wail, most people succeeded. The druid, who was a bear, failed it, but he was a bear. So it dropped his bear hit points to 0, and he switched back to druid. Nothing happened. I think Beazle, I can't remember if he passed or failed the initiative, but here's the thing about Beazle. Beazle made the deal with the hag, and he had that magical ring. Well, on the ring, of course, was the eye, which was watching the adventure, basically. But there were 2 jewels on each side, and those jewels were there to protect him. It was the hag's insurance policy on Beazle. She didn't care if everybody died, as long as one person walked out of that fortress with the necklace that was on the Banshee, which she needed to power this device that she has, right? So she kind of protected Beazle. And so when the Wail went off, it affected everybody. Well, it tried to affect everybody, it didn't. But it went off, and for Beazle, it created a shield around him. And one of those gems kind of faded out, right? So it used its power to protect him. Now, I kept the Banshee way up high, 30, almost 40 feet up, and that prevented anybody from using any kind of melee attacks on her. But I kind of underestimated this, because a lot of people there actually had ranged attacks, a lot of ranged magical attacks, and I kind of forgot about it. And I also forgot about Beazle's enchanted crossbow, which allowed him to shoot from range. So 4 out of 5 people actually could attack the Banshee. Grok couldn't get to her. He couldn't throw anything up there. He didn't have any means to get there, so he was busy dealing with the ghouls, which were still kind of pouring into the little section at the time. Now, this combat went by really, really fast. I mean, we were there for 3 hours and like 45 minutes. I think 3 hours went by like that. It was so fast, and it was so entertaining. Usually it's a sign of a really good game, or at least a fun game. But it was a thief who actually did the killing blow. Everybody was hitting with Moonbeam and kind of, I was going to say caltrops. That's not even possible. But, long-range spell attacks and whatnot. That's how they did it. I made a mistake. I should have used Corporeal Touch a little bit more, but I really wanted to keep her out of any kind of melee range because I knew everybody had magical weapons. But when they got her down to about half her hit points, the Banshee spun around, and I had her doing some kind of hand gestures as she was wailing and screaming, and what she was doing was calling forth the spiders as kind of a last resort. The spiders are almost inaccessible unless you find two particular stairwells to get into that section of the fortress. But for me, in my campaign, I have her as the Queen of Axeholm. She is in charge. She is ruling the roost. She is calling all the creatures to her aid, right? And that was the last thing she'd do. But it was Beazle who did the killing blow with his crossbow. And by that time, the spiders were coming in, but every time those spiders came up, launched themselves right on top of the balcony, boom, I swear, hammer, sickle, sword came down and knocked them out consecutively. I mean, like every time they came up, 3 people would hit them, they were gone. The spiders became useless. I did manage to get Naya, I think, because she was like dead center right when the spiders would come up. They nailed her and got her poof, right up against the wall with her webbing, but nobody else. I mean, right after that happened, spider drop, spider drop. Spider drop. I mean, they didn't last whatsoever. But I had a cool little radio drama that you can use if you're running this campaign. It'll work great because it's very esoteric. It doesn't really break down how the Banshee's killed, but it's literally called The Death of a Banshee. You can find it on my SoundCloud. And it wrapped up the evening really nicely. I think it worked perfectly. And it just simply highlights her death and the explosion that happens at Axeholm and all this release of the energy. Think of the Emperor in Return of the Jedi as he falls down and blows up and all this dark side power comes out. Kind of the same principle. So they wrapped up the evening, the last 20 minutes really going around the fortress, finally kind of doing that dungeon crawl. And I moved a couple things around. I moved some items from the Circle of Stones that come a little bit later and whatnot. I moved some items and put them to Axeholm. I actually moved some of the secret locations of some of these items from, I think, the king's bedroom or whoever that's supposed to be. And I put them in the throne. I just felt like that was more appropriate. So I did move some items from other locations that my characters will never go to because I cut them out of the adventure, but I didn't want them to be shortchanged and not have those things. And after they kind of spent some time looking around the location, they decided to go back to family. I think right now they are actually camping out inside Axeholm because most of their powers have been spent. So anyway, guys, that's all I got for you. This is a great little centerpiece. I implore you, if you're DMing this, pull out all the stops. Make it a lot of fun. It is a centerpiece of the entire adventure. It's a big crescendo. It's a big crescendo in the adventure with, of course, a dragon to come, whatever's going to happen there. But now we're a good 3/4 of the adventure. We have maybe 2, maybe 3 locations left to really explore, and the adventure is all finished. So anyway, guys, that's it. That's all I've got for you. See you in the next one.